We're here today to talk about the letter grades that have come out. I want to first of all talk about, there are certainly very few, but there were some good news. There was some good news in the letter grade reports that came out, and I will talk about those briefly, but the overarching takeaway is, as a state, that we've got much more work to do to improve our educational system for our students so that every student in Louisiana is getting a great education. Today's results are simply not acceptable. Let me start with just the brief highlights of some of the good news that was in today's report card. Number one, the fact that we actually have letter grades is a great step forward for the state of Louisiana. We pushed for this law in 2010 so that parents across the state can have meaningful information on how their children's schools are doing. For too many years, there's been a confusing set of data, whether it's SPS scores, stars, or labels. It is important that parents have clear, easily to understand information about how their children's specific schools are doing day in and day out. Secondly, I'm proud that Bessie didn't water down the standards. There was some effort, there was some pressure on them to weaken their standards. I'm proud they didn't do that. Instead, they have produced a report card that gives parents meaningful information. Third, there certainly has been progress. When you look over the last 4 years, for example, the number of failing schools has decreased. The number of schools getting D's or F's has decreased by approximately 20%. Numbers of schools getting good grades, A's and B's, has nearly doubled. So there has been some progress over these last 4 years. Having said all that, the data, the results we see today are simply unacceptable. 44% of the schools are getting D's and F's. Now, the way to understand that, if one of my children came home with a report card with almost half the report card being D's and F's, that simply wouldn't be acceptable. We would roll up our sleeves, get to work. That's exactly what the state of Louisiana has to do. You're going to hear a lot of excuses. You're going to hear some districts attacking the methodology. We don't need excuses. We need folks ready to go back to work and to make sure we're providing a great education to every one of our students. Now, when you look at some of the laws we passed, you look at the Value Added Assessment Act. That will give us the ability to reward and to recognize excellent teaching in the classroom. That measures performance from the beginning to the end of the school year, so we can recognize, reward, provide incentives to those teachers that are starting with kids below grade level, getting them to above grade level by the end of the school year. Secondly, we passed a very aggressive act called the Red Tape Reduction Act to remove the regulations, the barriers, the paperwork that are stopping schools from doing things like changing the length of the school day, week, or even year, spending more time on science or math, putting more students in an excellent teacher's classroom, as long as they can show that students are learning. Yet a union actually sued us to stop us from giving the public schools the very flexibility they claimed that they wanted. We've also passed bills like the Teachers' Bill of Rights to help keep our best teachers in the classroom, to make sure they've got the ability to maintain discipline in their classrooms, when teachers are telling us that was one of the #1 reasons they were leaving the classroom, they were leaving our schools. We've done other things. We've passed bills, for example, now we've got some of the best laws in the country to not only provide charter schools, to hold our charter schools accountable. I do think it's telling that in the last 4 years, in 3 of those years, the RSD has had the greatest improvement. I think that shows when you've got choice and accountability and transparency, we can actually improve our school systems fairly quickly right here in Louisiana. Bottom line is this: today's results are not acceptable. Our children only have one chance to grow up. For those that are defending incremental reforms that tell us just to wait, to be patient, they need to understand our children only grow up once. We need to provide them with a great education. It is important for our children's future well-being. It is important for our economic development. It is important we have a trained, skilled, highly qualified workforce so we can continue to outperform the southern and national economies. 70% of the companies that move here or want to expand here tell us one of their top 2 concerns is finding a skilled workforce. My wife and I graduated from public schools right here in Louisiana. You can get a great education in Louisiana, but today's report card shows we've got a lot of work to do to make sure that all of our students are getting a great education. To our parents out there, make sure you know what the letter grades are for your child's school. If your child's school is not getting A's or B's, demand better performance from your local school district. Do not accept excuses. Do not accept failure. To the excellent teachers out there, my message to you is that help is on the way. We're going to make sure that we reward excellence in the classroom. We're going to make sure that we promote those best practices throughout the state. And certainly to the people of Louisiana, let me tell them that today's results are simply not acceptable. It's one of the reasons we've gotten so involved in various legislative races, and especially the Bessie races. We want to help elect individuals who understand the need to make this our top priority. And let me be clear, if I'm fortunate enough to be reelected to a second term, My top priority going into our very first session will be to make sure we pass aggressive reforms to continue to improve our K-12 educational system. For example, giving parents of children in failing schools more options and meaningful options. Making sure that we build on the value-added assessment to give incentives to our best teachers and we replicate their success. To make sure that we actually we win our court case, are able to implement the Red Tape Reduction Act. We cut through the red tape, cut through the bureaucracy. The reality is, it is so important that we get a reform-minded superintendent. That's one of the reasons that we're pushing so hard, getting so involved in these Bessie races. It is important that we get these reforms done. I'll just close. I'll say this. There are going to be people that will offer all kinds of excuses. There'll be people that are going to be happy with incremental success. That is not acceptable. The students, the children of Louisiana deserve an excellent education. Today's report card is doing exactly what we intended when we passed this bill, is giving parents the information they need to demand excellence. And by the way, it is encouraging to me you're already seeing school districts all over the state beginning to respond to these letter grades. That is the first sign today's bill is working. They're already working hard to respond to today's letter grades. That is a great step forward. Today's results are not acceptable. This must be our top priority going forward, to make sure that every student in Louisiana gets a great education. I'll be happy to stop and take questions.
Governor, President Harry Truman once said the buck stops with the chief executive. He was the chief executive of the nation. You're the chief executive of Louisiana. How do you feel, as the chief executive? Does the buck stop with you? I mean, is it ultimately something that you feel at fault for this?
Two things. Absolutely. We're going to continue to push hard. Look, we don't have the votes today to put a reform-minded superintendent in Bessie. And that's why I'm personally getting involved in Bessie elections, to give us reform-minded individuals on Bessie board to give us the right superintendent. Kirk Talbot had a great bill to help support scholarship organizations, to help give parents more choices, give parents that are, especially with kids trapped in failing schools, more choices. Couldn't get a majority of that, couldn't get a majority of legislators to support that in the House. It's one of the reasons I'm getting involved in legislative elections. We helped to pass a great Red Tape Reduction Act. The unions took us to court, saying that they didn't want the same flexibility. Now, I want everybody to understand the background of the Red Tape Reduction Act. Public school officials rightfully said charter schools have more flexibility than traditional public schools, so we passed a bill to give them that same flexibility. Then they sued us for trying to give them the flexibility they said they wanted in the first place. So absolutely, we're going to take leadership. We're going to make sure that we do everything we can to elect like-minded reform officials so that we can make these changes. We've been trying, and we made progress. And again, there are excellent teachers out there, and there has been progress. You've seen, for example, the number of schools with A's and B's nearly double in 4 years. You've seen the number of failing schools, D's and F's, decrease by 20%. That incremental progress is not enough. We've got to do more. So absolutely, we're getting involved in these elections. We're going to make this a top priority. We're going to use our political capital. If I'm fortunate enough to be reelected, we're going to use our political capital to make this our top priority going into this first session of this next term.
More so than your first term.
Well, we're going to continue. And what I said, I gave you three specific examples where I call them the coalition of the status quo. Opponents that don't want change, that are happy with incremental reform, they're able to beat back our attempts to achieve even more reform. One of the reasons we're getting involved in these elections, I ask, and look, I know we're here to talk about letter grades, I ask the voters out there, these elections are important. I need help. I need help on the Bessie board. I need help in the legislature to get these bills passed, to get these changes made. There are folks that like the status quo. They don't want a reform-minded superintendent. They don't want Kirk Talbot's bill to pass. They don't want the Red Tape Reduction Act to be implemented. We need help in the legislature. We need help in the Bessie board, and that's one of the reasons we're getting involved in these elections. We're raising money. We're endorsing candidates. We're doing ads. We're doing mailers and calls and everything we can to help these reform supporters, these reform-minded candidates get elected to the legislature and the Bessie. So I need the voters' help as well to absolutely make this a priority and get this done.